Okay, we're now in episode 16, and I'm still covering the section in Haggai 2 where God says He's going to shake the heavens and the earth. There's a lot of dispute all the time over Bible, and one of the disputes is that it's a Calvinist favorite. But when it says all the earth, that it doesn't really mean all the earth. And the answer to that question is, first of all, you have to look at who is talking. If it's just some people talking, that can be hyperbole. And it might not be all the earth. They're just using that expression. But when God uses it, He's not using hyperbole. He means what He says. And when He says all in 1 John 2:2, that's what He means. All. Everybody. When He says the gospel went out over all the earth, when a writer of Scripture is speaking from God and says that, that's what it means. Now, that does not mean that it goes all over the earth instantaneously. It takes time. And so when God says He's going to shake all the nations, He means it. But it doesn't happen instantaneously. So I'm going to illustrate geographically what God means here. And we get our big clue about what this means actually from the book of Daniel. Okay, in order to show you this, I first got to go back in time to Nebuchadnezzar. I don't know if I can do this well enough. No, wait a minute. I got to try it again. Okay. This, approximately, leaving out Greece, going to about here, was the sphere of influence or the actual own territory of Nebuchadnezzar. Maybe it goes down a little farther. Okay, he either had direct influence over, in other words, vassal kings, or he actually controlled with his own satrapies. That was the name for a province. Satrap was the guy who ruled it, and a satrapy was the name of a province. That was the territory he ruled, and he was considered one of the greatest rulers of the world for a very long time. Now, when you have one guy at the head of that much real estate, which, as you'll notice, is joining 3 continents, which means there was a lot of travel that went along, guess where? Right in here. That's Israel. When you have 3 continents, see, here's Europe. That's Europe. Here's Asia. Okay. Well, I went too far. And then, of course, this is the coast of Africa right here. Okay, Africa and Saudi Arabia. All right, when you have that much real estate and they're all joined for purposes of making money and trade, whoever is in this, and it's still true today, this is why Armageddon takes place when it does. Okay, this particular section of the world is the most valuable section of real estate on earth. Not because of the people, not because of the culture, but because of the location. If you want to go to Africa, even today with our modern technology, a lot of your goods are going to have to travel over land. And if you want to go to Europe, and you've got a lot of people in Africa making the goods, well, then you still got to go over this land. You got air travel now, and you got sea travel now, but those are relatively more expensive than land travel. Not always. It depends on the routes. So early on in mankind's history, they developed trade routes which had a lot of emphasis on this area of the world, because you could make more money going this way, going from here upwards to here. It wouldn't take as long, and land travel was generally cheaper, because you had pirates in the seas, and you had storms that happened on the seas. Land travel, of all things, was generally safer, especially if you kept on the move. Okay? You know, it's harder for thieves to catch you if you're moving. So all the bandits and stuff that would inhabit the hills of these areas would have a harder time catching you if you kept moving. So land travel had a lot of advantages. Okay? It is still true. That's where Israel makes most of its money and always has, as a trading nation, kind of Switzerland of the Middle East. That's one reason why the Arabs want to capture the Jews, okay? It's greed. It's just pure greed. That's why some of the most expensive real estate in the whole world is either in Hong Kong, which has the same function, or in Israel. Hong Kong is a port to Asia, is one of the main ports to Asia. Okay? So it's not that the Jews are superior, and it's not that, it has nothing to do with that. It's just sheer geography. And God, knowing all this in advance, told Abraham, hi, this is your inheritance. Actually, the whole inheritance that Abraham has goes down like, well, wait a minute, let me show you. The millennial inheritance of Israel, and it's going farther south than I'm showing, is about like this, maybe a little bit higher. Okay, and definitely lower, covering all of Saudi Arabia. All right? That's the most important area of the world simply because of geography. All right? And God designed it that way. So now, what we want to do, if I can get the windows to come back right, and I'm having trouble doing that because the recorder doesn't like it when I'm using graphics. Okay, Persia, what Persia at the beginning of this story is about here. It's a little more to the right also that you can't see on screen. Okay, that's the approximate location of Persia. Okay, this whole mountainous region about right here. Okay? And I'm just using the map. You can't see cities and stuff like that. At that time, back in 607 or so, Nebuchadnezzar had taken all of this, all right, to about here, and actually a little farther north of the white box. He was also in control of that area in the north. Okay? So his sphere of influence was that far. So in 539 BC, Cyrus is coming from this area. As I said, Cyrus is coming from this area here. I had to convert the file in order to make it more viewable. That's about where Cyrus is coming from. Okay? And the reason why he's coming is he wants to take over this area here. Okay? Because that's the area that Babylon had control over. And he's coming about 20 years after Nebuchadnezzar had died and his nephew is on the throne. So this area becomes controlled by Persia. Now, it does affect the entire world simply because trade is better done over land in order to connect to the 3 continents. Okay? To get your trade going well, you want to have as much control as possible over that area. Every single military operation has its eyes on this area of the world even today. It was a big factor in World War II why Hitler lost. It was a big factor in World War I why the Kaiser lost. Okay? Control over this area of the world affects the entire world. And you can see why. There are 2 principal means of power in the world: economic and basically military political. With the political comes the military. Okay? And there's always been a debate among scholars. In fact, that was going to be my own honors thesis about really which is more important, and I maintain it's economic. My professor was, argued with me about that thesis, and I finally dropped it because I didn't want to bother with the politics of arguing with him. But those are the 2 big debates. What makes for power? Economics or politics? I maintain it's economics first, and the politics follows the economics. And the Bible is showing that same trend. That's where I get it from. Okay, I didn't invent the idea. All right? So this was why Cyrus wanted to take over the territory of Babylon. That's what moved him to do it. But you'll notice who's always in the center of things by God's design: Israel. That little country, strategically placed, always ends up being the cause of world wars, or at least the decider of world wars. And that's just as true today. The Arabs are fighting over that little blue box you see. And all of the world has to pay attention to what they say because of it. So it's just as true today that all the world is affected by that little strip of land as it was back in the day of 539 BC when our boy Cyrus, who's coming from over here, gets it into his head due to Isaiah 45, predicting it, that he should take over that too. Okay, which he does. That's 539 BC. Now, the other thing that affects, because it's economics driven, okay, I mean, people go where the money is. People pay attention to somebody who's rich, who's famous. And once you get rich and famous, you get money. If you get famous, then you get the money. Then you are rich and famous, and then you get lots of attention. Because people want to take what you have. Okay, if you've got something that other people don't have that they consider desirable, they want to take it from you or at least be near you because of it. You know, money and fame being the two topmost things. Beauty, intelligence are also there. But real intelligence and real beauty nobody cares about. So this is where the world attention is focused. That's why all the world pays attention. So anybody who got control over that region in the blue box got the attention of the whole world, because the whole world wants to have control over that area, because they all salivate over the money they can make from trade. See, when people are traveling from here, here's Europe, if you want to go down here in order to sell goods in Africa, okay, then who's ever controlling the land over here can charge you for going through their land. And that's exactly what's happened over the centuries. Okay? They can charge you for it. And that's basic rule of commerce. The bandits governed this, spent their time mostly on the seas, because they would look for shipwrecks, because there were lots of storms. And they were also looking for shipping going through this area right here in the moving blue box. They were looking for that so they could take the shipping. And it was harder to defend, you know, when you're on a boat. It's harder to defend your cargo than when you're on land and you can scatter. All right, so generally speaking, land travel is safer, although it's, you know, it can be longer, not necessarily. All right, so the argument, the focus of the nations is on this strip, this area, because of the trading gains they can make, because the money they can make in trade. Okay, because you're always making money off somebody else's work. They just need safe passage through, you know, this is why the Jews were so famous as soldiers. They needed safe passage through here. And the Jews provided it at a fee, of course. All right? So that's why this area of the world is the most valuable and the most sought after, not because the people are better, but simply because of the geography. Okay? And if you look at the policies of nations even today, one of the biggest things in Chinese foreign policy is to try to get control or at least friendship in Africa, and they also court the Arabs too, because it's a geopolitical strategy. Now you can see why, and that's why the U.S. has got to be concerned about the Arab presence in Iran. This is present-day Iran. Why they're concerned about Turkey, which is also Arab, and then this is going to be like the the borderline of Russia. That's why Russia took this. Russia's always wanted to have a port right out here. That's the reason why they fight. They're always looking for a warm weather port. This is all geopolitical history that can be confirmed in any book you want to look at. All right, geopolitics is really important driver of history. So when God does something in this area of the world, like make this guy take over this guy, that's going to affect the whole world. And there's a lot of travel going on in that section of the world, so whatever happens there, the culture, the mannerisms, the success stories, the methods of doing business, all that is going to spread throughout the world. So now Africa is going to be affected. They're going to make some changes in their policies due to it. Okay? Europe was affected, and they made changes in their policies. And every single government, even our calendar today, is based on what Cyrus did by going from there to taking over here. And when he took over territory that Daniel had charge of. And so the institutions and the administrative systems, the rules, the economic policies, they took over all that, and they found that it was good. Daniel was in power during the first 3 years of Cyrus. He dies about the 4th year, as we're going to see in the next increment. Probably 4th or 5th year. All right? So this is what Cyrus inherited. And this is why Darius, who's going to come 14 years later, is going to discover what Daniel had and re-implement it. And that's what's going to make Darius considered the Great. And all of our history, even today, our calendar, for example, why do we start school in September? That's based on the civil calendar. Israeli civil calendar starts roughly in September. Okay, the 6th month of the year ends about September 15th. Okay, about September 15th, for a long time, that was considered fall season, start of school. Civil thing, school. Okay, why do we pay our taxes in April? Why do we end our year in December? That was started by Julius Caesar, but he got it. He got it from these people. If you end your year, your tax year in December, it's going to still take you 2-3 months, especially given that travel time, because they usually paid in kind. They didn't usually pay in money. They paid in kind. And it's going to take that long for the stuff to travel. And so you collected your taxes at the spring when the crops came up, but you did your head counts and you did your census at the end of the year. That's why the Romans came up with the December census. And of course the Jews had Hanukkah at that time, when everybody was traveling to Jerusalem, so it was a handy thing. I'm trying to tell you that none of this is actually new in Jewish culture, and it's not, and our culture is based on what happened in that blue box. A lot of our customs are based on it, not simply because of the spread of Christianity, but it goes much farther back to the 600s and the 700s BC and even prior, because people saw the way David, for example, changed the administration of Israel, and they saw, oh, that's a good law, let's adopt that. Doesn't mean they became Jewish, doesn't even mean they like the Jews. A good rule is a good rule no matter who has it. The Chinese have adopted a lot of American customs, but that doesn't mean that the Chinese like the Americans. They just like that particular. They're extracting certain things. It's like if you go to Indian cuisine for dinner. You happen to like Indian food, and maybe you cook it, or maybe you eat it 2-3 times a week. That doesn't mean that you're buying everything in Indian culture. You're just picking that one thing. Well, that's what the nations of the world have been doing for thousands of years. They've been borrowing from each other, and that's all this is. But it does affect the entire world. Every nation on earth, even today, is affected by what we're about to see happening in the Bible text back in the 530s. And there's an even greater significance, which I'll also cover in the next increment. Okay, so now we're back in Haggai 2, and we're going to do a quick little review. All right? Because I've got to take you to like 17 different Bible passages still before we can come back to Mary. All right, as you hopefully recall by now, on the 21st of the 7th month, when the Lord comes and says all of this, I'm going to shake up all the heavens and the earth. And we've covered the idea of shaking up the earth but not the heavens, which we're going to cover. When he comes on the 21st of the 7th month, we understand now that there's only 18 working days in here. And during those 18 working days, Tattenai in Ezra 3, Ezra 3 was when they laid the foundation, but in Ezra 4 rather, Tattenai had come, which we don't see spoken of in Haggai, Tattenai had come and said, "What the heck are you doing?" See, they start working, and almost immediately he would have heard of it, because it's illegal. And so between that time and that time, Tattenai had written Darius the Great, explaining the answer that we saw in Ezra 4. Basically, they're saying that they're rebuilding because there's a previous precedence, legal precedence. There is a previous decree by Cyrus the Great saying that sending them back to the land, ordering them to rebuild, and that the contents of this decree are in Babylon. See, they should have been in both Babylon and Susa, where Darius is located. Darius is located in Persepolis, which is not far from Susa. They should have been a duplicate set of records in Susa. When you have a decree of the king, you make copies. And there should have been an official copy deposited in the records of Susa, which obviously the Magi had hidden or destroyed because they didn't know about it. Okay, when Cambyses, Cyrus had gone, this was back in 539, he took over Babylon 539, then he keeps on running westward toward Egypt, because he wants to get the box that you just saw, the geographical box. He was after that. Every king is always after that geographical box. So was he. So he goes running westward, leaves his son Cambyses in Susa, okay, but when the people want to rebel against the Israelites for rebuilding, Daniel's still in power in Babylon. It's like the second year that Daniel's in power, still, back in power. He's having trouble with the Persians that are in Babylon and the Babylonians who are against him. And that's when he has the thing with the lion's den. Darius the Mede is caught between the Magi, who instigated that plot about worshiping Darius. And so Daniel has to get thrown in the lion's den. Darius repents. Daniel, of course, is saved by God. And that makes Darius the Mede convert. But that also makes Darius the Mede die. I suspect he was murdered, but I'd have to look it up. So he lasted only 3 years. Cyrus is still campaigning. Cambyses is back in Susa. Okay? That is about 536. All right? So from 536 until 522, you got Cambyses, who's ostensibly in power in Susa, but he doesn't know about these records about Cyrus the Great, or if he knows, he feels he can't do anything about it. Meanwhile, the Magi, who are fighting against him, he's fighting with them, they're fighting with him. He kills his brother, who supported the Magi faction. And then the Magi faction put up a fake brother, while Cambyses has to go back westward also after his father dies in 529. His father dies in 529, Cambyses has to go west, also defending the box, the geographical box you just saw. And while he's gone, the Magi put up their own candidate, who's known to history as Pseudo-Smyrtus, Gautama. And they pretend that guy's the brother of Cambyses, and the brother, of course, is really dead, but Cambyses can't admit it, so, they have their entree into making this joke. And the generals are really against the Magi, so there's a lot of civil war going on amongst the upper echelon in Susa. Nobody's taking the time to care about a temple in an area that's close to the west anyway, where Cambyses is, to see if the records are right. And so when the people in that area of the land who are against the Jews write to Pseudo-Smyrtus and say, hi, these people rebel, Pseudo-Smyrtus is going to be upholding that position. He's not going to look in the records. He's not even rightfully king. He's just going to rubber stamp what they say. And he can always say, well, this was the report. So that's what's happening between 529 and 522. Meanwhile, the generals are trying to get rid of the Magi and therefore get rid of Pseudo-Smyrtus, and they finally do away with the whole group, which means the Babylonian group are also ousted. But Daniel has died meanwhile, so Daniel can't help. Daniel probably died like 4th or 5th year, okay, after Cyrus took power. And Cyrus was in power from basically 539 till 530 when he dies, 530, 529. So Daniel was dead by then. He'd been dead for like 4 years. Maybe he died 534, something like that. Okay, because he had definitely retired by Daniel 11. Because he's no longer in office in Daniel 11. So that's the story. All right, that's all the machinations going on behind the scenes. So when Darius comes to power in 522, he's been a year and a half in power. He's newly in power after all this struggle. He's got all these generals that he's got to reward, and then he's still got, you can't wipe out all of your opposition. You just get power, and now you can really begin to wipe out your opposition. So he's got opposition in Susa. That's one reason why he moves to Persepolis. He's got opposition in Babylon, and they got control of the records. So there's a whole lot of struggle going on here that you don't see because the Bible text presumes that you know about it. I mean, when people were getting this at the time it was written, they knew that was current history to them. It would be like if you said 9/11. You don't have to explain 9/11 to anybody. Just say the word 9/11. And somebody who doesn't know what that means will think it's a number you dial on a telephone. And that's kind of where we're at. When we see these words, we don't know what they really mean because we don't know the cultural and the historical background. But that's what it is. So here it is, 522, and our boy, Tattenai, all he knows is from, Pseudo-Smyrnus saying, no, don't let them rebuild. Well, Cambyses is away. And then Cambyses also died while he was in Egypt, or near there. This guy doesn't have the actual record of the Cyrus decree. Okay? So he goes to them and he says, hey, what's going on? Now, what I don't understand, and this is a habit of the Hebrew, is why didn't the Jews back up here? Okay, well let's go to Ezra. Okay, where's Ezra? See, Bible books are not organized properly. Ezra's way up here. It shouldn't be up here. Okay? See, first year of Cyrus is when they get the order to go back. And then those are the tribes that go back. And then Ezra 3 records the year they come back. Okay, in the 7th month they finally were in their cities. They celebrated the Feast of Booths. Okay? But they don't begin to lay the foundation until the 2nd year after they got back, which is 537, 536. Okay? And then they laid the foundation, which we find out from Haggai 2, and we're going to see, on the 24th of Kislev. Okay? Why, when this happens here, this chapter of Ezra, okay, all this is their machination against him, okay? Why was it that at that time the Jews didn't say what they will say in Haggai? Why were they silent here? Probably because their belief was too small. They were afraid. See? They stopped by force of arms. This was a time when they should have said what they end up saying in Haggai. How long is it going to take me to find the book because it's not organized in any kind of order that makes sense? This is when Zerubbabel, okay, which we saw, please, I hope I can do this, which we saw in Ezra, God help us, Ezra 4, see, Ezra 5. They didn't say anything here. But in 522, because Haggai visits, Zerubbabel explains the story. And as soon as he explains it, instead of caving in, Tattenai writes, as we saw here in Ezra, see? Tattenai writes, just after talking to Zerubbabel, which is just after this. Okay, so 15 days travel, all right, would have certainly gotten them there by the 21st of the 7th month. The courier delivering Tattenai's message to Darius certainly would have gotten there by then. Okay, now, see, when God gives you dates, they're important. Let's present or presume, because it's a reasonable thing given travel then, that at the time that God comes up again to Zerubbabel, this is the second time he's coming, at the time he comes, he knows, God knows, that Tattenai has sent and Darius has received Tattenai's message. So at the very least, Tattenai has written and Darius has the message and is reviewing it. You got to allow a couple of weeks at least for him to research the records in Ecbatana in Susa. So it's pretty reasonable to say that he got the message and was starting to research it, depending on his court schedule and how busy he was. You know, he might not have got it the very first day the courier got back, but generally he would have been told about it the minute the courier got there. That's how their post worked. So God, knowing this happened, had Haggai go to Zerubbabel, okay, and remind them of their cowardice back when? In Ezra 3. See, they were cowardly here. They were crying. They're crying. So that tells you their mental attitude. And that mental attitude continued in Ezra 4 because they were able to discourage the people and frighten them from building. That's Ezra 4. And they stopped them until Darius came to power. Until Haggai came to them. See? That's when Tattenai writes. And at the time that the letter should have gotten to Darius, given his post, God comes back a second time. Same year, still the second year. Take courage, take courage. All right, I am with you. We've gone over the I am with you. He's reminding them of their sorrow and of their lack of courage. And he's telling them, take courage. Okay? I am with you. So now he's going to tell them the result, and they might even know that Darius has gotten Tattenai's missive at this point. They could certainly assume it. They certainly would have been told that Tattenai was writing. Okay? So now they're a little apprehensive about what's going to happen. And so God likens it to Egypt. It's going to be as much of a shock as it was delivering them from Egypt. Okay? Which I hope you can see it really was, because it's a big deal, as you saw with that picture of the world, to take over that middle box, because everybody wants it. And he's basically promising he's going to shake, and I'm going to leave the heavens out because that's a bigger story I got to cover next. The earth, the sea, and the dry land. You saw that depicted graphically. What dry land? What earth, and what was the impact on all the world, because that box of real estate, when it changes hands, it affects everybody. That's why he says, I'll shake all the nations. And it's a political shaking, it's an economic shaking, it's a shaking of a good kind as well as the shaking of a bad kind. I mean, whoever was in power at the time, okay, obviously got overthrown, and whoever was going in power, this time Cyrus and Darius, okay, would be giving the land a stability it hadn't had. Okay, because again, that area of the world is very disputed, still even today. So when the dispute is on and one entity is controlling it all, then it's very unstable, and the whole world is actually embroiled in it, just like we are today. We're all embroiled with the Arabs, who invented Islam in order to wipe out the Jews. That's all it is. It's just a terrorism. If you read the Quran, you'll see it for yourself. It's entirely founded on anti-Semitism. The whole book. So, what's going on in that area of the world affects the whole world, even today. So, I will shake all the nations. Doesn't mean he's doing it all instantaneously. and they will come. Well, we saw already Darius, the reply that at this point they don't know about. God is thinking about what Darius is going to reply because he already foreknows it. All right? And he's forecasting how they're not going to lose the utensils. And by the way, they're going to get ongoing gold. So you've seen that. You've got this. Because I need this to be firmly in your mind when we get back to Mary, which is still going to be 3 or 4 videos away. Okay? Then he next says, the latter glory of this house will be greater than the former. In other words, this house is the second temple that they're just starting to rebuild. Okay? It'll be greater than the first temple, which was considered a wonder of the world by the ancient world of the time, which was the Solomonic temple. The Solomonic temple was an absolute wonder of architecture. Okay? And it's only anti-Semitism that causes people to not talk about it as much. But they actually came and visited, and they actually coveted that temple. And that was even true in Rome's day. Pompey wanted to conquer the Jewish temple. He wanted to take it over. And of course, so did Caligula, and so did Nero. All right, and these guys had a lot of money already. They had, they had control over this landmass. So why would they care about this temple so much? Why was it so important to them? So there was something to this argument about the temple, the former, having a glory. Okay? It's just a lot of it's hushed up and trashed up. The records about it are trashed up. But you can't squish it all. You can find, snippets in places. So he's predicting that the smaller temple that they're building is going to be far greater than the former. Now, why is he saying that? Well, now we're going to get into what he means by the heavens. The latter glory of this house, the first and foremost meaning of it, is that the house is going to become a man, namely God-man, namely Jesus Christ, namely, Daniel 7:13 realized. Okay, because the temple depicted him. All of its architecture was designed as a metaphorical description of the God-man. So anybody visiting that temple would say, well, why is this here? Why is this constructed this way? Why did you line this empty room? The Holy of Holies was an empty room. Okay. It had the ark in it, but the ark got melted down when Nebuchadnezzar took over. So after that, in the rebuilding of the house, there's nothing in there. There's just the bedrock stone, which is called today the Temple Mount. And that was it. And a curtain, a 90-foot curtain. Okay? 60 cubits high, 90 feet. The latter glory of this house, namely Christ, will be greater than the former. Yeah, the temple depicted becomes a man, and he's God-man. That's greater than the temple, no matter how great it was. All right? And the latter glory of this house means that house, this second house that they're building, is the house he is going to visit. See, when you have a dignitary visiting a place, that makes that place more important. I'll never forget, I almost fell over. Right across the street from the White House, there's a little hotel. It's, I forget, the name of the house begins with an E. It's a little tiny, ugly hotel. And it has a little restaurant on the ground floor. And its claim to fame is that Abe Lincoln slept there. That's it. There's nothing remarkable about it, and they even have little tours where you can visit the room where Abe Lincoln slept, and it looks like nothing. It's got a chair, a table, a little picture on a wall. There's absolutely nothing remarkable about it. But Abe Lincoln was there. So all of a sudden that little hotel that had pretty decent food became famous. Okay, and you considered yourself important if you ate there or slept there. That's the kind of latter glory that this is talking about. That's why the Wailing Wall of this temple is still standing. And everybody goes there. It's called, the place where they go, where it's located, is called the Kotel. And the Arabs are on the opposite side of the wall, and they keep throwing stones at anybody visiting on the Jewish side of the wall. You have to be careful sometimes, because you can get hit by stones. Okay? So, and that real estate is the most expensive, and of course the Arabs claimed the Temple Mount, All right, because they'll do anything to hate the Jews. Anything. Temple Mount belongs. Temple Mount is the original site of the second temple's Holy of Holies. Okay? And also the first temple. Okay, that's why the Arabs wanted it. That's why they invented a story of Muhammad ascending from that space. It's total joke. Total anti-Semitism. Just in order to take it from the Jews. Okay? So that's the latter glory of this house. Even today, that house of which we only have the Temple Mount, which is some bedrock, really ugly bedrock, and the Wailing Wall, that's the most famous temple in the world. And it's not even standing. And it's disputed by two nations. It is the most famous temple of all time. So you see, the latter glory of the house they were building, even today, is more famous than the Solomonic temple ever was. And it's really hard to find records of other nations and visitors talking about how great the Solomonic temple was. It's very hard to find those records. It's not hard to find the records about this house. So you see, what God said came true already, even before Christ returns. All right, and then he says, and in this place I will give peace. That's a millennial promise. That's where I'm going to get into in the next increment, because that is tying to heavens. When he says, I'm going to shake the heavens, and I will give peace, those are two things that tie together, and they go all the way back to Psalm 90. So I'm going to have to cover like 16 or 17 Bible passages to show you what he means by this and this. Okay? But I want to just get through this section first. So that's what he means by what he's saying. So, he comes a third time. And this is why I'm going to close this segment with this section. He comes a third time. On the 24th of the 9th month, second year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to Haggai again. Now, this is really important. It took me a while to figure this out, why he says this. He's being very sarcastic. Ask the priest to rule. And this, you have to know Jewish culture to understand this. If a man carries holy meat, that means meat that has been offered to God, consecrated to God. But see, what you did is you brought your sacrifice, and then some of it was offered on the altar to God, because he doesn't actually eat food, duh. And then the priest, that's why the priest had to be consecrated to God, separated to God. The priest ate it. So when the priest ate the food that was offered to God, there were special rules about how they ate, when they ate, what they ate. I mean, they had special food rules because they were consecrated to God, and the only food they were supposed to eat, maybe not the only, but mostly, was food that was consecrated to God. And when they ate, they were supposed to, it was like a little mini Bible service for them. They were to remember who they were, what their role was, that they were representing God, they were there to teach. Everything they did had a special meaning. That's why they had so many rituals and rules. It was all metaphorical teaching. It didn't make them better people, but it reminded them of their role. It was total grace, of course. So that's why God's bringing this up. If you carry consecrated meat, in other words, meat that's been offered to God, but it's your portion, in the fold of your own garment, and now a second kind of food, if bread touches the fold, not the meat, the fold, or cooked food touches the fold, or wine or oil, or any other food touches the fold, touching the fold, does it become holy? Now, what God's doing here is he's using a form of rhetoric that is pretty much exclusive to Judaism, that you can find written this way in the Mishnah. Okay, the Mishnah is basically a recording passed down through the ages, principally of the sages of the 1st century A.D., but what they say is the product of rabbis talking to rabbis for centuries prior. Okay? And it's the Talmud, it's called the Talmud. The Mishnah is part of the Talmud, and it's been there forever and ever and ever practically. I mean, it goes all the way back to the writing of the law. The Jews consider that oral Torah. Okay, that's one of the things they call it, and it contradicts the Torah, but I'm not going to get into that. The point is that this system of arguing and discourse is classic rabbi talk. Okay? If you're carrying something holy inside a garment, and bear in mind that he's talking about a priest, in a priestly garment, and bread touches the fold, not the meat, cooked food, wine, oil, or any other food touches the fold, will that thing that touched the fold become holy? And rightly, the priest answered no. You with me so far? This is a fine point of law, but it gives you a sense of how the rabbis reasoned too, and that's really important. Then Haggai, speaking for God, if one who is unclean from a corpse touches any of these, meaning the bread, food, wine, oil, any other food. In other words, even if it's a priest, see, if you touch the corpse, you were considered unclean, and you usually have to wash, and you couldn't touch anything till evening. Okay, and sometimes it was even longer. All right, and that becomes an issue when Christ dies, because Nicodemus and who the other guy, Joseph of Arimathea, touch Christ and his corpse. They wrap his corpse, and they do it at Passover. Okay, so it was a real issue, because if you were unclean, you had to announce yourself as unclean so people would stay away from you until you performed the ritual that made you clean again. So he's saying, if anybody is unclean from a corpse, touches any of these, will these things become unclean? And the priest answered yes, because anything, if you touched the corpse, anything else you touched became unclean. That's why you'd tell everybody, oh, I fell over a corpse, don't come near me until, tomorrow, or whenever the allotted time was. Sometimes it was up to 7 days. Okay? So, that's the second rabbinical question he asked them. Now here's God's answer. He is likening, he's taking that issue, and he's taking that issue, and he's saying, that's what this people is before me. Now bear in mind, he's talking to the most positive Jews, because you had to be really positive to want to go back to Israel and rebuild the temple. You were going into opposition and you knew it. And he's saying they're all unclean. I mean, he's really chiding them. The whole people, the whole nation are unclean, so is every work of their hands. They're building the temple, and he's chiding them. And what they offer there is unclean. He's just basically discouraged them as much as can be. First he says, take courage, I am with you. But then down here, he's insulting them. Now, whatever you think you did right, you didn't. You're unclean. Why? Because, what he's trying to explain to them, is they're thinking that because they're engaged in holy work, that holy work that they're doing transcends to make their garments, in other words, their outward actions, holy. They're mistaking the inward holiness of the meaning of rebuilding the temple for the outward action they're doing in the rebuilding. They're thinking themselves holy for doing it. And he's trying to remind them, headed off at the pass, because that's what got Israel in trouble in the first place. Just because, and this is important for all of us, it scares me to death. Just because I'm reading Bible to you and I know it's correct, doesn't mean I'm holy. The only thing that makes me holy is what the Lord did in me. There's nothing, the words coming out of my mouth are not holy. Okay? They're not. There's not, saying Bible does not make me holy. It's an enjoyable thing to do, and I love it more than anything else. But it's not making me holy. Only God's making me holy. And that's what he's trying to tell them. Just because you're engaged in an activity that on the internal is holy, in other words, the Holy Spirit's running it, don't mistake your movements or your activities or your works as also being holy, and therefore pride yourself. Because, honey, you're unclean just the same. I'm unclean. Okay? No matter what I do, and here I am talking about Bible, I'm still unclean. I'm saved in Christ. And when I use 1 John 1:9 during the between sins, okay, then I'm not making mistakes. But, you can sin just by having an incorrect thought and agreeing to it. That's why I use it like breathing, because I never know, I'm sure if I've sinned or I've just been tempted. Okay? I'm always unclean. The priests, these are the people who are supposed to be regarded as holy. They're always unclean, and so is everybody else. What he's doing, getting ready to do, is to stress a stronger reassurance. But he's just insulted them. You see why? He's making a distinction between the inside meaning of what they're doing and their outside being, corpuscles. Hello, my corpuscles are not clean. My corpuscles have the sin nature in them. There's nothing about me that's clean. Not now, not ever. When I die, then I get a new body, and then it'll be clean. Okay, now watch. In spite of this being unclean, everything they do is unclean. Ceremonially clean is not the same thing as truly clean. That's the point he's making. But now consider from this day forward, before one stone was placed on another. See, this is an anniversary of the foundation of the temple. When you're digging a foundation, you don't have any stones. You've just finished digging the foundation, getting ready to lay stones. Okay? Before one stone was placed on another in the temple of the Lord. From that time, before the foundation, from the time that they laid the foundation until the time he's talking, they had drought. Remember, we saw that above here? All right? He says, you look for much and it comes to little. You've sown much, but you harvest little. He's paralleling back what he said back in the 6th month. And now it's the 9th month. Okay? And they have been working now, see? In the 24th of the 9th month, I haven't told you the punchline yet. On the 24th of the 9th month, they've been working an additional 2 months from this point. So they've now got about 18 days plus 2 months, and minus the Sabbaths that came in between, that they've been working. All right, so they've been working roughly 2.5 months minus the Sabbaths. All right, and he's just told them, I'm sorry, you're all unclean. In other words, they're not going to deserve what he's going to say next, but he's going to do it anyway. But now, consider from this day forward, before one stone was placed on another, because it's the anniversary of the temple's foundation, from the time you laid that foundation, remember, you sowed much, but you got little. When you came to a grain heap that was sized for 20 measures, there were only 10. When you came to the wine vat that was sized for 50 measures, there would only be 20. In other words, the produce was low. I smote you. See, he's reminding them of what he said in Haggai 1. I smote you, and yet you did not come back to me. In other words, here you guys were wringing your hands and priding yourselves on being back in the land, but you weren't building my temple. But now, 2.5 months that you started building, only 2.5 months, and he's talking to them about December 15th in our terms. Actually, December 25th in our terms. It should be December 15th, but Pope Gregory cut 10 days off our calendar, so our December 25th is really December 15th. All right? So that's not normally a time when you'd have plenty, when you'd have growth. But he's saying, I smote you then, but from this day onward, from the 24th day of the 9th month, from the day when the temple of the Lord was founded. See? He's commemorating the anniversary of their digging of the foundation. And after 2.5 months of them finally getting the courage to start up building on the foundation, to commemorate that, he says, consider, is the seed still in the barn? See, it wasn't growing, so they stopped planting. And now we're past the planting season. Is the seed still in the barn? Yeah, because what's the point of planting? Because of the wind, mildew, and hail, they stopped planting. Is seed still in the barn? Even the vine seed, the fig tree, pomegranate, olive, it's not borne fruit. Yeah, because they're storing it. They gave up. Yet from this day on I will bless you. In other words, the weather's going to change. See? Shake the heavens and the earth. One way to shake the heavens is to change the weather. There are bigger ways that we'll see in the next video. Seeds still in the barn because they gave up. Vine, fig tree, they just weren't growing nothing. But from this day on, from what day? The anniversary of the founding of the temple. See? From the day the temple of the Lord. From this day, the 24th of the 9th, the day that the temple was founded. Now, I don't know. See, look. That's the second time he comes on the same day. See, God-man, okay, two natures. So he comes twice. You get that little bit of wit there. And it's past planting season. Well, actually, yeah, it is past planting season. They should have started planting back in Bull when the rain came. But he's saying, do it now. And then the word comes a second time to Haggai. So it's actually a total of 3 times. There's the first, going to the priests. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. That's still the first one. There's the first one. He's going to the priest. And when he says this, he's still talking to the priests. I'll start blessing you now. In other words, you can go ahead and plant even though it's not the planting season. Even though the rain season, which is Bull, month of Bull, 8th month, has passed. Start planting, because I'll bless you. See, and that would make a big shake-up in the world, because that season and that part of the world, you're not supposed to plant. So what does God have to do? He has to change the weather. See? Shake the heavens. He has to change the weather. Okay, so he's going to change the weather starting on this day, and he's telling them that's what he's going to do. So now the weather's going to change. And the weather's going to change, and what's going to happen? People are going to ask why. And so now the priests have something to teach. Okay, well, see, this is what God told us. From this day on, and probably that same day or the next day, the weather suddenly changed and they were able to start planting the seed. And, you know, if you're going to do weather as a change, you have to do it over a region. Because everybody's weather is dependent on everybody else's weather. So if you have nice weather in one place and that weather's going to move, that means that the region that's going toward where? Toward Susa. Is going to be nicer than expected. So there's going to be a greater yield than expected because people are going to be able to tell, especially if they've got this advance notice that has just been told to who? The guys in charge of telling people things. And they're going to repeat this message. This is why the weather's good. Okay? And so he closes it again. He comes a second time to Haggai, and this time instead of speaking to the priests, he's speaking to the civil authorities, Zerubbabel. And see, he's now governor of Judah again. Saying, I'm going to shake heavens and the earth. Now, here's the punchline. You'll notice that this is specifically what Mary's going to be quoting, is a repeat of what was up here. Okay? And he's being called governor of Judah, no longer Tattenai. Zerubbabel, governor of Judah. Okay, my guess is that when he came the second time that day, the first time he came, all right, and I can't prove it yet, but I'm going to try. The first time he came and he gives his first speech, yet from this day on I will bless you. My bet is just after he said that, the letter from Darius to Tattenai came to them. So now Zerubbabel is governor of Judah because what was that? That was the order of Darius. See? Ezra 5, Ezra 6. Darius says, hey, leave him alone. Let them do their thing. So now Zerubbabel is governor of Judah. And that's why God comes back. Now, you can imagine that, how do I want to say this? If I say December 25 to you, I don't have to tell you that it's Christmas. Okay? If I repeat something I had said, I'm going to shake heavens and the earth, which I had said a couple of months ago. The first time I said it was predictive. Okay? But the second time I'm saying it is like, see? I'm repeating what I say now in the 24th day of the 9th month, to remind you of what I predicted at the time that you probably knew that the letter of Tattenai went to Darius. But now you're getting the answer, see? And now he repeats. See, Darius repeated, he closed his statement. So this whole thing is a paragraph about before and after. Okay? Before and after they get. Zerubbabel's governor now, so I'm pretty sure that that's the day that they got the answer from Darius saying it's okay. And, because Tattenai will be coming back there with animals, with money. It would have taken a little extra time for him to get all that stuff. He would have gotten the answer. He probably would have gotten the answer maybe he got it here. And they just sent a courier without any animals or money yet to quickly reinstate Zerubbabel, and then they brought the animals. But somehow, this is the day that they get the answer from Darius. And so now God is coming back a second time on the same day. And of course, when God came the first time on that day, he knew what he was talking about. And the second time in the same day, he's going to the civil authority who would have gotten the letter from Darius. The letter from Darius wouldn't have gone to the priest, it would have gone to Zerubbabel. And now Zerubbabel's reinstated because of the letter. See, I'm shaking heavens and the earth. And now the far fulfillment, and this is where Mary's quoting. See, he's still talking future tense. I will overthrow the thrones of kingdoms. He's not talking about the temple anymore. He's talking about the world. Thrones of kingdoms, destroy the power of the kingdoms of the nations. I will overthrow chariots and their riders and their horses and everybody. Okay. To understand this, you have to understand that at the same time, it was in the 7th month, and we'll have to go through that too, Zechariah, who was another prophet of this time, had already come to Zerubbabel making this promise. So we're going to have to go there too. But this is the long-term promise of Messiah. And how do we know that? Right here. On that day. In other words, on that 24th day of Kislev. Not the current one. On that day, I will take you, seed of Baal, son of Shealtiel, Mary's ancestors, my servant, and I will make you, and the signet ring means heir apparent. When he took the signet ring away from Jeconiah, that meant that Jeconiah's line was not going to produce kings. Jeconiah was a son of Solomon. But Zerubbabel, through Shealtiel or through somebody else, okay, it's either Shealtiel or Zerubbabel or both are sons of Nathan. Nathan was a son of David, a younger son of David and Bathsheba. And you're going to become the new signet ring. That means Christ is coming from Zerubbabel. For I have chosen you, and there's no condition. It's going to just happen. On that day, see, on that day. So that's the day that Messiah is going to be born. And of course, we find out through Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 that day ends up being Hanukkah. You see where I get it from? Now, we still got to cover more about what he means by shake the heavens and the earth, because Israel was given a year-by-year, blow-by-blow description about this whole time, starting in Psalm 90, updated by Isaiah, and updated also by Daniel. So by the time Zerubbabel hears this, he knows what time it is, and he was expecting that kind of news. He just didn't know what day it was going to be. And that's the day it was going to be. Oops. See, whenever I do something dramatic, something goes wrong with the screen. That's the day. And we'll pick up again to explain more about the heavens, because he repeats that, see. First he says the heavens and the earth I'm going to shake. And down here he's talking about thrones, and he's talking about the Messiah promise. But in order to understand what's down here in blue, I got to cover more about what's up here in blue. And that's where we'll pick up in the next episode.